to BCTV's Meet the Candidates 2022. This series affords you an opportunity to hear from those folks who are running for elected office. Today, our guest is Representative Laura Sibilia, who is running for Windham 2 State Representative. Welcome, Representative Sibilia.
Marty, thanks so much for having me.
Well, thank you so much for coming into the studio. It's nice to be in person to do this. So I have to ask you, you've done this before, but why are you seeking this office?
Well, I have asked myself that question. The last couple of years, legislators were not immune to the challenges that COVID, wrought for all of us. But I feel like I have been there a couple of years, 4 terms. This will be my 5th term if I'm elected. And there are some really important issues that I'm passionate about, that I've been working on, that I feel like really could still use some of my energy and the experience that I have. And frankly, there's been a pretty big turnover within the legislature, and I feel like I have a responsibility, if the voters want to send me back, to help kind of reset with a new legislature.
So the Windham 2 is actually a new district for you.
Yes, yeah.
So what sets you apart from the other guy?
Well, I would say fundamentally that I believe that our government still works. That is not to say that there are no problems, but I believe that those problems are still able to be solved by the people when they are informed and have access to accurate information. I think that they can resolve those issues. That's certainly how I got into politics myself, going to try and solve problems within our system. And I also believe that there's room for everyone to come to the table to help solve those problems. I'm adamantly opposed to trying to scapegoat or leverage marginalized people for other issues. And unfortunately, that's something that we see in a number of candidates right now. So that's why.
All right. Well, so as you mentioned, you've been 4 years. This is the 4 times. This is the 5th one. What are your top 2 priorities this time around if you're elected?
Yes. So it's probably to the surprise of no one, issues that I've been working on remain kind of a high priority for me. I see them as issues that are really critical for our rural communities and our rural people in terms of transitioning into the future. And so that would be climate change, and in particular, making sure that our electric grid and electric sources, energy sources, are stable as we're moving through a number of transitions with climate change. And also telecommunications, making sure that, as these massive investments that we put out and this massive mobilization of Vermonters that is working to get broadband to the last mile is working, that we're ensuring there's adequate accountability and that we're getting the job done.
All right, great. Well, all right. So let me touch on a couple of issues.
Sure.
All right. So first one would be, if you're elected, how would you address the rising costs of food, fuel, and other goods?
Yeah. So these are tricky issues, particularly given that we see really volatile swings from different types of factors. So COVID did disrupt our economy, how our economy works. We had a bunch of federal funds come in to help smooth that and help take care of people. And there are effects of both of those things on our economy, including, and we see the war overseas in Ukraine and Russia. All of those things are combined to drive up pricing on food, energy, housing, all of this. And we've seen that. And the short-term fixes for that, I'm not sure what the short-term fixes are for that, except to make sure that we are making wise investments with the federal funds that are out there, and that we are as thoughtful as can be about what we're investing in, particularly around, and that we're not standing still. So that even though there's pain in this moment, we're not failing to think ahead particularly with energy. I think the pricing that we've seen should not have us frozen with fear about taking action to get off of fossil fuels and start eliminating that pain. It should be a motivator, and I worry that it's actually a detractor from moving in that direction. So I think we have to take kind of a long-term view, see how we can help people in the moment with fuel and housing and food, with necessities. But I think we have to take a longer-term view and keep moving.
All right. Well, so that segues into my second issue question for you, which would be, in Vermont, what can you do, or how can you help ease the housing crisis?
So this is a really multiple layered issue. And you'll see that I kind of start sounding like a broken record on a lot of things, Marty. But I think the first thing starts with a plan and really understanding what are the dynamics at play here. What are we trying to accomplish? Who wants to work on this? What are the tools that are available? And do we have a plan to start getting there? Do we have zoning that allows us to get there? Do we have partners and funding that allows us to get there? And I think that that's possible. In Vermont, I think we fail to really recognize we don't have county government, and a lot of states do. And so we have the state trying to play catch with all of our little towns. And that can be really difficult, make it difficult to solve some of these bigger issues like housing. So entities like the regional planning commissions, regional development corporations, and others coming together to help support initiatives that are trying to get up, to help towns think about where they want to put housing, what are the tools, bring together coalitions. I think that's what we need to do. So again, a little longer term view.
Well, and that's fine. So another issue in the news, public safety.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on not only enhancing public safety, but reducing violence in Vermont?
Yeah. Well, I would say there's a couple of things at play here. We have our mental health care system, which I would not call high functioning in this moment. And we have our public safety system, which I would also not call high functioning in this moment. And I think both of those systems are being heavily impacted by workforce challenges, number one. There certainly is a lot of funding that is available now through COVID and other things that have happened, but we don't have bodies. And we also have these disjointed systems, as I was talking about with housing. With public safety, we've got state police and that's it. We've got municipal entities where they might be. We've got varying degrees of sheriff's offices operating in different capacities, and dispatch and 911 that are also short-staffed. And so I think we have to be looking at a much more systemic administrative, take a much more administrative and systemic look at these systems, and again, look at what are we trying to accomplish. I think that when we have a shortage of bodies, we have to look at how we can work together to support each other and make sure that we're getting the job done, that we're keeping people safe, that we're helping people get the treatment. And I'm not sure that we're doing that. I'm not sure that we've got the right incentives out there to help people collaborate.
All right. Well, here's another one then. I think I already know your answer, but let's talk a minute about the climate crisis.
Yes.
We're seeing it in Vermont. The Vermont Climate Council released its climate action plan. What pieces of the climate action plan would you take up if elected?
So I was one of the leaders in the House in getting the Global Warming Solutions Act passed. And the reason that I felt that that was so important is because we didn't actually have a plan for what we needed to accomplish, how we might get there, who the partners might be. And we didn't have a governing entity to interchange with that. So this council is the result of that and their initial plan that they have put out. Last year, the last biennium, we worked very hard to get the clean heat standard passed. And we did get it passed. The governor vetoed it, and we very narrowly missed overriding the governor. The clean heat standard is very important. It is looking at, there are two things with climate change. Well, there's one thing with climate change. Let me talk about this with Vermonters. In Vermont, if we reduce our emissions to zero in Vermont, it will not change what's happening with climate change in our country. And people will point to that all the time. And I say, yes, you are absolutely right. Nonetheless, there are much larger economies with much larger populations, and their behavior is imperative that it change in order to affect climate change. And when their behavior changes, they are changing the economy, they are changing markets, and that will affect Vermonters. Okay, and what I worry about is Vermonters who have the means to do so are already starting to transition away from fossil fuels and to more climate-friendly practices. And those without the means or the knowledge or the tools or the awareness are being left behind. And I see parallels to what has happened with our telecommunications transition, those that were left behind on the copper landlines, which became more and more expensive to fix, less and less reliable, and really created public safety conditions for folks in rural areas, contributed to decreased home values. And I see parallels to that with acting on climate change. So folks who can afford to transition their homes to cheaper fuels, to fuel sources that are less climate negative, are doing so. And so what is that doing? You know, you're leaving the poor, the most dependent on these fuel sources that the world is transitioning away from. That doesn't work for me. We can't leave those folks behind. We have to help them transition. And by the way, part of that transition are small fossil fuel dealers who we need. They have taken care of their customers for years and years. They have these relationships. They have the ability to service, to bill, just local knowledge. We need to help them transition as well. You know, we need everyone to come along. And so, you know, that is a very big priority for me. And as I said, also making sure that our electric grid, you know, as we're transitioning more and more towards electricity, that we have enough energy available in Vermont, and that our grid is stable, that, you know, what is coming on and off of our grid, our renewable sources, all of that, how that's moving through our system is stable. And so those are really important issues that I would take up next year.
Wow.
And part of the climate, there's a lot in the climate. There's a lot of transportation issues in the climate council, but that's not where I've been working. So.
Well, it also sounds like with every one of these questions that I just asked you, I mean, there isn't a short-term fix. So what you got to do is there are things that we could do now, and then what you're talking about is working to the future as well, making that investment now.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
All right. Last question for you.
Sure.
All right. This is going to be the toughest one.
Okay.
All right. What do you want voters to know about you?
So, you know, I am a mom. I grew up poor and I live in rural Vermont. And so, you know, those pieces of me are really what drive my thinking and how I approach problems. You know, I always have an eye out for how will, you know, my neighbors in rural communities who aren't necessarily paying attention, you know, how are these policies going to affect them? How is government helping them? How is government letting them down? How can we talk to them more effectively? And so, you know, I'm always trying to communicate with my constituents, you know, and Vermonters in general, and explain what is happening. I think that that's really important, going back to your question about kind of what differentiates me from my opponent or others. Government does work if you work government, if you show up, and if you don't, there are not great things that are happening out there. So I believe that we need to dig in this moment, that we need to help people dig in this moment, that even though our challenges are great on some of these issues, certainly around climate change, certainly around threats to our democracy, that we can move through these, if we maintain our knowledge base and engage with our communities. So that's what people should know about me.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Representative Laura Sibilia, candidate for Windham 2 State Representative. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you, Marty.
You can learn more by visiting Laura's campaign website, www.laurasibiliavt.com. That's www.laurasibiliavt.com. The general election is Tuesday, November 8th. Remember, you could vote early in person. You could vote absentee by mail. You can vote absentee hand-delivered on Election Day. Whichever works for you, please vote. Thanks for watching Meet the Candidates 2022. I'm Marty Cohn. Stay healthy.